In this video, I'm going to be redesigning one of the smallest apartment kitchens I've ever seen, because this space really needs some help. But I have to somehow figure out how to do this on a really tight budget, which isn't going to be easy. So in this video, I'm going to try my best to come up with a concept that completely transforms this tiny cluttered space with as many affordable off-the-shelf products as possible. This kitchen belongs to Alex, a 25-year-old forensic engineer who got this small one-bedroom apartment just a few months ago. He's slowly been renovating the place, but when it came to the kitchen, its minuscule 3.6 square meter size was a concern. Alex loves cooking, but understandably he doesn't love this kitchen, and right now that means that he never wants to use it, as there's dangerously little space around the hob and the shallow worktop is mostly occupied by the sink's drainage rack. There's also some really weird features like this chamfered countertop, which looks like it was necessary to create space for the door swing, and the only available spot for the bins makes it almost impossible to open the fridge. So as Alex has a budget of approximately £3,000, I thought I'd see what I can come up with without taking away any of this kitchen's functionality. I started out by modelling the existing space, which meant drawing out the existing shape of the room using the plan and dimensions that Alex provided, and then I extruded up the walls, which I imagine are around the standard height of 2.3 meters tall. After modelling in the 762 door, I then modelled in the rough size of the cabinets, which were 90mm shallower than the usual 600 at 510mm deep, as well as that weird cabinet which is under the chamfered countertop. Next, I grabbed a narrow standalone oven and fridge freezer from SketchUp's 3D warehouse that just about squeeze into the end of the room. And then I roughly modelled in the wall cabinets, which are really shallow in a pretty ugly hodgepodge arrangement. After dropping in the sink and drainage rack, as well as the microwave, kettle, toaster and bin, it gave me a really good idea of how small this kitchen really was, and this really opened my eyes to some of the spots where this space was being incredibly underutilized and how this was something I could potentially fix. I realised that the problem with this kitchen, like many others, is the corner unit, as this entire cabinet is essentially useless because it's so hard to get things in and out of, especially because the sink's in the way. The most sensible option that I imagine might increase the value of this home too would be to steal a small amount of space from the bedroom next door to create a decent sized galley kitchen, as this would transform this room to be normal sized. However, as this is something that Alex had already considered, and he clearly knows that I like a challenge, I decided to see what was actually possible with the space as it currently is. In theory, you should be able to make this space work with a single line kitchen, as there is enough space for 4 600mm wide units along the main wall, but in a tiny 3.6 meter squared space like this, every spare inch was going to count. Firstly, Alex mentioned that he enjoys batch cooking, so a decent sized freezer was a must. Because a dinky under-the-counter fridge freezer wasn't going to be an option, I decided to go with a full-sized integrated option that's way larger than his previous one, whilst being incredibly sleek and inconspicuous at the same time. Next to this, I went for another integrated IKEA option for his oven that's also bigger than his last one, but with the added benefit of having a generous storage drawer at the bottom. The current layout of this kitchen has hobs right up against the fridge, which is definitely not recommended. So because here in this design the oven is integrated, it allows us to pick an independent hob, meaning a 2-burner induction option can be provided for a faster and safer alternative that reclaims some of the valuable counter space either side, which actually makes a lot of sense as most people rarely cook with more than 2 burners going at once. As this creates some distance either side of the hob, I dropped in a large sink and pull-out tap, which is incredibly helpful for cleaning large items like woks, and despite this choice taking up a lot of counter space, flush models like this one can be easily covered by something like a chopping board for when the additional counter space is needed. Underneath, when paired with the right waste trap, there's a ton of space for cleaning supplies or bins. However, in this case, I'd love to see this space utilised by a decent sized countertop dishwasher that can be sneakily hidden behind the cabinet doors and plumbed into the sink's water supply and waste pipes. For the cabinet next to the main doorway, rather than simply picking a shallower unit, I'd recommend getting one made up by a kitchen fitter, as creating a customized chamfered unit with shelving is actually pretty easy and will really maximize the space inside it and allow it to blend in with the rest of the kitchen when paired with matching cabinet fronts. Then for the walls, despite the kitchen only having a 2-burner hob, it does still need proper extraction. So I decided to go with this integrated unit, which can be placed inside of a cabinet at the recommended distance of 650mm above the worktop for electric stoves. And as a bonus, this still provides a ton of storage in the cabinet space above it. For the drainage rack, you may know from my home kitchen video tour that there are options which fit inside the cabinet above your sink, which not only declutters your countertops, but in small spaces like this, it can also be used as storage, meaning you can be lazy and never actually need to put your things away after they've dried. For the microwave, I didn't actually realise this until making this video, but certain IKEA integrated microwaves actually fit inside of their wall cabinets, providing an incredibly sleek solution. This isn't great for short people, but it is an ideal solution for small spaces where there isn't much counter space available. And then for the floor, I applied a grey linoleum that's more sustainable and warmer underfoot than tiles, and I picked a beautiful set of Ascoli spotlights by Astro to light the space, along with some LED strips under the wall cabinets, shallow countertop and along the plinth. Finally, as there simply isn't room in this kitchen for drawers, I dropped in a rail along the splashback, which is perfect for hanging items like pans, utensils, and even cutlery and pots too, keeping everything off the counters, and then for sharp, flat metal items like knives, they can simply be stored on a strong magnetic strip. With essentially the entirety of this kitchen fitted along this one wall, there is still a little bit of space that we can utilise back on the other side. Because this area is recessed slightly, it's actually possible to fit a small worktop on here on heavy duty angle brackets that can be securely fixed to the wall studs. When paired with outlets, this makes it perfect for things like kettles, toasters and blenders, keeping the main countertop clear and providing enough space underneath this countertop for a bin and recycling. Now, you could potentially turn this entire wall into storage with shelving, but if this was my kitchen, to save it from feeling overly small, I'd be incredibly tempted to install cut-to-size mirrors and mirror this entire wall, creating an illusion that doubles the space in size. So, as I was now keen to see how all of this would look in the real world, I set the rendering process up in V-Ray and brought the final images into Photoshop. These final images came out great, and you can see that I did decide to make a couple of changes, such as reducing the sink size and picking a marble effect quartz countertop that's definitely a bit more expensive, but it does allow for an underslung sink and a clean edge along the chamfer that simply isn't achievable with a laminate worktop. Over in Photoshop, there was really very little to change other than the oven and microwave models where they didn't really show the internals very accurately. So I made some adjustments using images of the products that I could find online, as well as some basic lighting adjustments to ensure that the images looked their very best. And with a few last tweaks, the final images were done. I'm absolutely thrilled with how this kitchen concept turned out, and I think it's pretty amazing what a little reordering can do to make a space more enjoyable to use. This tiny space provides all of the luxuries of a much larger kitchen, such as a full-size fridge freezer and an oven and even a dishwasher, and the additional shallow worktop provides so much counter space without intruding at eye and floor level, which has a huge effect on how we perceive space. And when paired with the mirrored wall, it makes the kitchen feel infinitely larger than it currently does right now. But finally, before I go, chances are that you're interested in design and simple living if you watch this channel, for which I have a killer audiobook recommendation that you're gonna want to hear about, called The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz, which I listened to ages ago using today's sponsor, Audible.
As the number of choices we face increases, freedom of choice eventually becomes a tyranny of choice. Routine decisions take so much time and attention that it becomes difficult to get through the day. In circumstances like this, we should learn to view limits on the possibilities we face as liberating, not constraining.
This book was a complete lightbulb moment for me, and it caused me to really understand why I crave a simpler lifestyle so much, especially when it comes to living in small spaces like this one. But as someone who struggles to find the motivation to read, I probably would have never read this book if it hadn't have been for Audible. Audible has allowed me to listen to loads of audiobooks each year, as I can listen to them when driving, working out or travelling, tasks that I'd have otherwise have viewed as a waste of time. But now you can read Barry's book or pretty much any book with a completely free 30-day trial by visiting audible.com/Daniel Titchener or by texting Daniel Titchener to 500 500. Thanks Audible for sponsoring this video, and remember that you can sign up to have me redesign your space with the details that I've left down in the video description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.